All right, we are going to start part two of reading the collected works of C.G. Jung. Volume two is called, what is it called? I just checked. I forgot. Uh, Experimental Researches. And we're starting with word association. And in part one, uh, the point of part one was that there seems to have been a lot of work on research into word association with people who have problems. But the question that Jung was trying to answer was, how does word association work with normal people? So all of part one was setting up how are they going to do the experiment, explaining what kind of word associations there are or how they're classified. And now in part two, we're going to talk about the results of the experiment. All right, well, this is not going to be just like a straight reading of whatever the words are, because I want to understand this uh, as we go. You know, sometimes if you just read things without thinking about it or rereading, you miss a lot. So I will go back and I will reread things, and maybe once or twice or three times I will look up words that I don't understand. So this is not just an audio book where I'm just going to read the words, but it's more of an exploration of the material. And because my main channel is teaching English to people who don't speak English, I also want to, when possible, because this is a very technical, this is very technical language, a very technical book, but when possible, I also would like to summarize some of the things that they're talking about in very clear, simple, easy to understand English. But there are two problems with that. The first problem is sometimes I don't understand what they're talking about. And the second problem is sometimes it's really hard to put into very simple language the ideas that they are using or the words that they choose. So it could be a little bit difficult sometimes, but then again, if you can explain something in very very simple language, it's a good sign that you understand it. So let's see. Let's get started with this. We've got part 2, the results of the experiments. A. Results obtained from individual subjects. Subjects reacted very differently to disturbing stimuli. Producing internal distraction was the most difficult. Subjects reacted very differently to disturbing stimuli. Producing internal distraction was the most difficult, as already stated. It was not even possible to achieve with all educated subjects. External distraction, I wonder what an internal distraction would be, like feeling sick? Internal distraction by metronome beats, so that's a purposeful distraction, was somewhat easier. But here too, great differences are apparent between individual subjects. It therefore seemed necessary to give the figures of each subject fully. Here, a plethora of tables cannot be avoided. All figures are percentages. Okay, and I forgot to mention, by the way, that if you are watching this and you seem to understand something that I don't understand, please say in the comments, because uh, I would like to understand this as fully as possible. And if you're watching this, you probably do too. And maybe you have some interesting input to add to this. So please, if you're watching this live, please leave comments. Please give your insights. Okay. So let's see. We've got the first group is educated women, 14 subjects with 4,446 reactions. Subject 1. In general, the character of these associations, see table, is very objective and almost entirely influenced by subjective constellations. In the normal state, external associations prevail over internal ones. Between the first and second hundred of the normal reactions, a clear difference is apparent, there being an increase of 9% in the group. We attribute this change to a certain lassitude appearing in the reception of the second hundred. What is lassitude? See, these are the kind of words. I'm not sure what that means. Let me look up that word, lassitude. A state of physical or mental weariness, lack of energy, so feeling tired. Okay, so wait, let me reread that again. What were they? Why were they saying a state of lassitude here? Where was it? We attribute this change to a certain lassitude appearing in the reception of the second hundred. So maybe they did a couple hundred word associations and then the person got tired and you could see that they were getting tired. Which psychologically has no more significance than a relaxation of attention. Okay, and there's a footnote here. Let me find it. Okay. This is the footnote about the lassitude. Asche Fanberg says, our attention is so enormously unstable, the non-controllable and unavoidable changes in our psychic life so great that we should not use short experimental series. On the other hand, one must not forget that in the course of longer experiments, signs of fatigue occur, so that if it is not, for example, permissible to compare the first 25 associations with the last 25 of a series of associations of 200 reactions, without taking this fact into consideration. This Aschenfanberg has noted, thus Aschenfanberg has noted the same phenomenon, but, in our view, has not interpreted it correctly. Okay, well that makes sense, that you start with energy and maybe your associations will be different in the beginning, and they'll be different at the end when you're feeling tired. There certainly can be no question here of psychological fatigue, which, as Aschenfanberg has shown, brings about an increase of sound associations. So when you get more tired, you start rhyming more or reproducing the same amount of syllables or things like that. I think that's what they're saying. The preceding psychic effort is much too slight for that. On the other hand, the relaxing of interest could very well be identified with lassitude in Kreplin's sense. And then we have another footnote here. Let's see. Kreplin distinguishes between lassitude, Müdigkeit, and fatigue, Ermüdung. So I wonder what the difference is in English, because I don't know what the difference between lassitude. Let's look at the definition of lassitude again. A state of physical or mental weariness, lack of energy. So lack of energy, I guess lack of energy is different from feeling very tired. Let's see. Lassitude he regards as a sort of warning, a subjective feeling which, however, usually but not always develops real fatigue. So maybe it's like a precursor to fatigue. Somebody's getting tired and then they will be exhausted. Or somebody's losing their energy and eventually they will be exhausted. Okay, let's see. Now we have the chart. Let's take a look at this chart. It's funny, even in the book, Jung didn't want to Read the chart. He says, I can't help but bring the chart. Okay, this is hard to read. Let's see if we do it like this. It's pretty blurry. Okay, so we have special quality, group, and these qualities, the first one is grouping, predicative relationship, causal relationship. First 100. Okay, but I don't think that I'm going to read all of this because that would be pretty boring. But what they're doing is they're classifying or they're plotting the number of associations that fall into this category. So in the first 100, 26 were grouping, 26 were predicative relationship, and 22 were causal relationship. So I don't know, grouping, maybe that would be, I don't remember, even though I just read this a few days ago, but maybe that's something like, oh wait, let's just Google it, let's see if Google can answer that. Grouping and word association. Just maybe there's a quick definition here. Plural groups, countable noun, a grouping. Oh, but this is just about grammar. Wait, let me ask ChatGPT, maybe, because Google doesn't seem that smart anymore. They're not very good at answering things anymore. Let's see. So I'm just asking ChatGPT, what is the meaning of grouping? And word association. Let's see. Categorizing, clustering words together based on some commonality or connection. So that would be like, if I say cat, you say dog, and those are both animals, or those are both domestic pets. That's what I thought. Okay, predicative relationship, maybe that could be like water, drink. And causal relationship, hit, pain, maybe like that. So in the first 100 words, 26 were groupings and 14 were predicative and 2 were causal. In the second 100 words, it seems almost the same. And then in the I'm not sure what they mean by internal here. 60 metronome. So the metronome is doing 60 beats, I think, per minute. And then 100. Okay, well, this is kind of confusing, but this is all, they just plotted all of the answers. All right, let's go back to reading. I know I said I wanted to understand this, but oh, it's pretty confusing. Okay, let's go back. But again, if you have ideas, please comment. Please make comments. That's what the comment section is for. Help. All right. The columns after those giving the figures for normal conditions describe the changes of association under the influence of artificially distracted attention. From a purely dynamic point of view, one could say that the associative energy, Rauschenberg, was to such an extent diverted to another area that only a fraction of it is still available for the reaction. Well, let me see that again. From a purely dynamic point of view, one could say that the associative energy was to such an extent diverted to another area that only a fraction of it is still available for reaction. Thus, the correspondingly poor or easy, that is, strongly canalized association is given, because the stimulation of ready and accustomed cerebral mechanisms requires a small amount of energy than the canalization of relatively new, unaccustomed connections. Oh boy. Okay, let's see. I just wonder, thus, a correspondingly poor or easy, that is strongly canalized. And that word canalized, what they were talking about the other day, means, things are kind of pushed together into the same canal, the same channel of relatively new, unaccustomed connections. So they're kind of grouped together because that's the way your brain groups them together, or something like that. And that's easier to pull out than these other kind of word associations. From this point of view, the increase of linguistic motor forms by 18% in internal distraction can easily be understood. Well, I'm not really sure what they mean by internal distraction, though. Maybe I missed that the last time we read this. Okay, so let's read this footnote for number 4. What does it say? Asha Fanberg, this is a quotation from him, at the time of the information of the external association, linguistic habit predominates, while later, on reflection, a secondary tendency to coordinate develops. I'm just going to ask ChatGPT. Again, let's see. What is internal distraction in word association? Internal distraction in word association refers to a situation where a person's response to a stimulus word is influenced or disrupted by internal factors, such as their own thoughts, feelings, or okay, that makes sense, or their mental state. This means that instead of providing a response that is directly related to the stimulus word, the individual may be distracted by internal thoughts or associations, leading to a less direct or relevant response. For example, if the stimulus word is apple, a person experiencing internal distraction might respond with a word like computer, because their thoughts are focused on technology rather than the fruit. In this case, the distraction is internal, stemming from the person's own mental processes. Okay, thank you, ChatGPT. It's much better than Google, you have to admit. Even if AI is going to take over the world and our lives, it works better than Google. Okay. Let's go back. But to understand actually, I want to read that again now that we have a better understanding of what is meant by internal distraction. So the columns after those giving figures of normal conditions describe changes of association under the influence of artificially distracted attention. From a purely dynamic point of view, one could say that the associative I'm sorry, I just got sent a message. I got distracted for a minute. Let me start over. From a purely dynamic point of view, one could say that the associative energy, Ranchberg, was to such an extent diverted to another area that only a fraction of it is still available for the reaction. So if you have an internal distraction, you have less energy to devote to the project of word association or the attempt at word association. I think that's what they're saying. Thus, a correspondingly poor or easy, that is, strongly canalized association is given. Because the stimulation is ready and accustomed, cerebral mechanisms requires a small amount. Because the stimulation of ready and accustomed cerebral mechanisms requires a smaller amount of energy, a motor response, a physical response, a physiological response requires a smaller amount of energy than the canalization of relatively new and unaccustomed connections. Okay, so physically it's easier to it's kind of the opposite of what I thought at first. Physically it's easier to give a very natural response association, but it takes more energy actually to give a weird response, a canalized response. From this point of view, the increase of linguistic motor forms by 18% in internal distraction can be easily understood. Well, how do they know that somebody is internally distracted? Do they report it? Is it self-reported? Or, I mean, how can they even say that? Do they say later, were you distracted? But to understand the origin of the numerous sound reactions in external distraction is more difficult. Asche Fanberg believes that it is possible to hold motor excitation responsible. This exists in mania, exhaustion, and alcoholic intoxication, but it has been proved that flight of ideas or modes of association similar to flight of ideas can also occur without motor excitation, e.g. in epilepsy, catatonia, and manic stupor. In our experiment, motor excitation is as good as excluded. So they're not taking into account, I think this is what they're saying, they're not taking into account the fact that the body is reacting to the external stimuli in some sort of way. The act of writing, which could be interpreted as motor excitation, is excluded in internal distraction, the results of which coincide with those of external distraction. Oh gosh, let me read that again. The act of writing, which could be interpreted as motor excitation, you're exciting your motor skills, you're using your body, is excluded in internal distraction, the results of which coincide with those of external distraction. Thus, no relationship between sound reactions and motor excitations can be demonstrated. Rather, do we see the origin of sound reactions in diminished attention. Distraction has primarily an inhibiting effect on the development of internal associations. Distraction has primarily an inhibiting effect on the development of internal associations. So, in regular language, distractions make it harder to have internal associations. Okay. It's confusing because sometimes they say internal distraction, which is one thing, and internal association, which is another thing. That would be like making an association of a word like apple, maybe sweet would be an internal association. It's something that's inside the apple. And favors the formulation of external, i.e. more mechanical associations, hence sound reactions in large numbers. So when there are some distractions, it's more tempting for the person to make external associations. Okay. Hence sound reactions in large numbers. So wait, maybe if you say like, what would be a word like hit, an internal association might be angry, because a person hits if they're angry, right? That's an internal thing. But an external or a physical or a mechanical association would be hit and mark. Maybe something like that, I guess. I don't know. We shall have ample opportunity to point out shifts of association form towards external, that is, mechanical associations. We can say that when the experiment was at all successful, these shifts only occasionally took place. Okay, I just have to take a 1-minute break, and I will be back in a minute. Oh, let's see. Okay, I'm back. Let me see if I've got the right settings here. Okay. So earlier I was asking, I wonder how they know if someone is internally distracted. I mean, how can they say that? Maybe the way that they're going about this is they're saying, well, if you're internally distracted, then your associations will veer more towards, I even forget which kind they talked about, less physical things. Or I don't remember. I don't remember exactly what it was. But it would help if I could retain some of the things that I just read. Okay, well, let's keep going. Maybe it will become more clear as we continue. Okay. Distraction has primarily an inhibiting effect on the development of internal associations. Oh, internal associations. So if you're distracted, then probably you would make fewer internal associations, and you would focus more on external associations like sounds or mechanical things. Okay. It is striking that in this obvious tendency towards mechanical reaction, sound reactions too were clearly favored. But in the present state of our experience, sound reactions are not mechanical. They are apparently non-canalized associations. In our interpretation, sound reactions, which are only a slightly higher level than more repetition of words, are the most primitive of associations by similarity. After early childhood, they are no longer used, but always called up by the act of speech. They predominate as soon as a disturbance impedes the activities of the next higher levels of association. Slips of the tongue, or mishearing. They are because of their uselessness in the normal thought process, repressed and usually exist outside of consciousness. I want to read that paragraph again. It's striking that in this obvious tendency towards mechanical reaction, so when you are distracted, you focus more on mechanical reactions. If we're talking about word association, I think that's what I'm reading here. Sound reactions too were clearly favored. So, and a mechanical reaction, let's see, if you say hit, then maybe a mechanical reaction would be, I don't know, elbow or something, or wrist or fist or something. Maybe that would be mechanical. I'm not sure. But sound reactions, so, if you're doing word association and somebody says hit, would a sound reaction be pow? Is that what they mean? Sound reactions, too, were clearly favored, but in the present state of our experience, sound reactions are not mechanical. But they are apparently non-canalized associations. I'd like to know what they mean by non-canalized. Now, let's see. I'm just going to ask ChatGPT. Just to review, what is canalization? I kind of remember. It's like channel, it's like canal. So things are kind of pushed into the same grouping. But let's just see if we can get it clarified a little bit. In word association, what is canalization? In the context of word association, canalization refers to the tendency of individuals to produce highly similar or stereotyped responses to a given stimulus word. It implies a constrained or channeled flow of associations, where people tend to follow predictable patterns in their word associations rather than expressing a wide range of diverse responses. For example, if the stimulus word is sun, a canalized response might be moon. Okay. because the association between the sun and the moon is a common conventional one. Canalization suggests a lack of variability in responses, indicating that individuals are being guided by established or culturally ingrained associations. Researchers studying word association may examine canalization to understand how certain words or concepts are strongly linked in people's minds, and to what extent cultural or societal factors contribute to these patterns. It provides insights into the structured nature of human cognition and the influence of shared experiences on the formation of associations. I hate to admit it, but I'm always glad when I consult ChatGPT. It gives pretty good answers about this. So let's go back to this where it says sound reactions too were clearly favored, but in the present state of our experience, sound reactions are not mechanical. They are apparently non-canalized associations. So maybe if you say hit, a canalized association would be like pain. But if you say hit and someone says pow, which would be the sound of a hit, right? That would be considered an association that is not typically put together with that word. In our interpretation, some reactions which are on only a slightly higher level than mere repetition of words are the most primitive of associations by similarity. In our interpretation, sound reactions which are only a slightly higher level than a mere repetition of words. So if somebody says hit and you say hit, that's, I guess, would be considered pretty primitive. And one step above that would be the sound. So if somebody says hit and you say pow, that's a pretty primitive response, but a little bit more advanced than just repeating the word. After early childhood, they're no longer used, always called up by the act of speech. They predominate as soon as a disturbance impedes the activities of the next higher level of associations. Slips of the tongue or mishearing. They are, because of their uselessness in the normal thought process, repressed and usually exist outside of consciousness. We call the increase of linguistic motor forms and sound reactions the blunting of the reaction. We call the increase of linguistic motor forms and sound reactions the blunting of the reaction. The attentive reaction which takes place in the focus of consciousness. The attentive reaction which takes place in the focus of consciousness is not a sound reaction. The attentive reaction which takes place in the focus of consciousness is not a sound reaction, unless this is expressly sought. But if one succeeds in directing attention to another activity, that is, moving the psychic reaction outside the focus of consciousness, then all those associations occur that had been repressed from clearly conscious reactions. Wow, this is really complicated. Hard to understand. Wait. If one succeeds in directing attention to another activity that is moving the psychic reaction outside the focus of consciousness. So if you can direct the attention to some other activity that is moving the thought or the process inside the head outside the focus of consciousness, so that they make the answer by accident, or they give the reaction by accident, unintentionally, just involuntarily, then all those associations occur that had been repressed from earlier, from clearly conscious reactions. Oh, wow. then all those associations occur that had been repressed from clearly conscious reactions. So the point of having a distraction is to hopefully get the conscious mind to focus on the distraction and hear the unconscious reaction. That's what I'm understanding from this. Wow, is it complicated? We shall deal later in detail with the significance of this hypothesis for the pathology of association. With faulty attention, the stimulus concept is not raised to a level of complete clarity, or in other words, it remains on the periphery of consciousness and is apprehended only by virtue of its external appearance as sound. With faulty attention, the stimulus concept is not raised to a level of complete clarity, or in other words, it remains on the periphery of consciousness and is apprehended only by virtue of its external appearance as sound. So the person shouldn't realize they're being distracted for a reason or a purpose. The cause of these defective perceptions lies in the weakness of their emotional tone, which in its turn is dependent on the disturbances of attention. I'm a little bit confused by this. Okay, every process of appreciation of an acoustic stimulus begins at the level of pure sound perception. Every process of appreciation of an acoustic stimulus begins at the level of pure sound. So you perceive the sound. You understand that it's there. From each of these levels, associations can be externalized if simultaneously the speech centers are ready to discharge. I'm sorry if this is annoying that I keep reading the same sentences over and over again, but I'm trying to understand what he's saying, and this is written in such a tedious way that it's hard to get the point. From each of these levels, associations can be externalized if simultaneously the speech centers are ready to discharge. So you make the distraction, and he's talking about levels of distraction. And if the person is in the right state where they can make the association, give the reaction, give the word, this can be helpful, I think, is what he's saying here. What do you think? Tell me what you think about this. Leave something in the chat. Say something. That this does not normally happen is due to the inhibiting effect of directed attention, that is, the raising of the stimulus threshold for all inferior and undirected forms of association. In this case, the high frequency of meaningless reactions, up to 6% in external distraction, is noteworthy. They are partly due to strong perseverations. Intention. Oh, we were looking at something like this before. Intention. Out of humor, one notices the intention. To rescue. Art of poetry. Strong, mighty. Hatred. Magnificent. Maybe the weird response is rescue. So if you say intention and the person said rescue, and they're trying to chart how they got there. So intention, out of humor, one notices the attention. Okay. Strong, mighty. So if somebody said strong, you would understand if they said mighty, but if somebody said strong and the response was hatred, oh, I don't know. I'm a little bit confused by this. And partly due to distraction due to the unaccustomed noise, of the metronome. Appearance, rhythm. Okay, I really don't know what he's saying here. This reaction shows to some extent how strong an effect the disturbing stimulus had on the subject. The intense lowering of attention also explains the unusually high number of sound reactions. The gradual predominance of acoustic and linguistic factors is also illustrated by the distinct rise of the figures in the columns for alliteration and consonants. There is also a definite increase in the words of the same number of syllables. The increase of perseveration during distraction is not easy to explain. Perhaps it can be attributed to the lack of association caused by distraction. It seems to us worth mentioning that the external distraction in this case is a progressive one. We have used the sounds to demonstrate the progression. We divide the two experiments of external disturbance each into 3 parts and counted the sound associations in each part. So the progression is as follows. First experiment 557, second experiment 568. Subject 2. The general character of the associations is objective. The external associations only slightly predominate over the internal. Internal distraction seems to have had the most intense effect in this case. Sound reactions increase continuously from the first 100 on. The group of verbal associations shows in comparison with the former case certain differences during distraction. The agreement in grammatical form shows a distinct increase, and the agreement in number of syllables also increases generally. Consonants and alliteration, however, decrease somewhat. We do not, of course, know the individual causes of these differences. So as time grows, as the distractions grow, so does the agreement of number of syllables in the response. Okay, the relatively numerous failures are striking, most of them occurring in the first, the relatively numerous failures are striking, most of them occurring in the first 100. Of the 4 in the first 100, 3 were in answer to emotionally potent stimulus words. In the second 100, there's only one. But at the same time, numerous predicates, in this case, value judgments, coming to the fore. This circumstance seems to indicate that failures are essentially emotional phenomenon. I remember that they defined failure in the last part, what that means in word association, but I forgot. Word association, what is the term? Let's just check it again. Failure, I think, is like repeating the word. It doesn't understand my question. It's giving me word associations for failure. But I think they defined failure as like repeating the word or something like that, or taking too long to respond. If I remember, I've got dog hair on my face, if I remember correctly. Okay, let's see. We should like to point out, in this case, the largest number of indirect associations coincides with the smallest number of sound reactions, and conversely, the largest number of sound reactions coincide with the smallest number of indirect reactions. This correlation is, as will appear later, probably not coincidental. Subject to about 24 years of age, intelligent, well-read, Okay, and this is just a chart showing plotting the reactions. I'm not going to read all those numbers. Okay. The nature of internal distraction, which with this subject was in general more successful than the preceding one. The nature of internal distraction, which with this subject was in general more successful. Why are they saying that? Why would an internal distraction be successful or not successful? I don't understand. Deserves some discussion. We intentionally directed the subject's attention mainly to visual images, as in our experience, these are the sensory phenomena that most frequently accompany the association experiment, and in most subjects occur with great vividness. Much rarer, on the other hand, is the ability to observe and report this phenomenon accurately. For instance, the first subject gave some rather unsatisfactory information in this respect. The second subject, on the other hand, observed very acutely on the whole and was able to give clear information. The experiment is illustrated by a few examples. Singing, opera, or concert singing. Directly after grasping the stimulus word, the subject sees a scene from Tannhauser on a certain stage, hearth, fire. Sees a particular memory image of a fireside scene at a house in London, tile, roof. Sees red roofs. Journey, itinerary. Sees an English traveler. Apple, tree. Sees a picture of Eve with the apple. Honor, sense of. Sees a vivid memory image of a scene from Sudermann's Honor. Sail, cloth. Sees a sailing boat. Deportment, rule. Sees the vivid memory image of her younger brother at school for dancing and deportment. Modest. Ending why? Why ending? Modest, maybe modesty? Sees a picture of a certain young girl, plant, kingdom. Sees a certain picture, book with pictures of plants, sign, post. Sees a crossroads, peacefully, rest peacefully. Sees a certain small kitten, music, enjoyment. Sees the interior of a certain concert hall, vivid memory image. These examples show that the reactions are very simple, mainly linguistic motor forms. The mental images are in a certain associative relationship with the reaction. According to the subject's account, they occur directly with the reaction, if not before it. In our view, the reactions are mostly mechanical side associations, which are stimulated on the way to a higher reaction. The stimulus image did not reach the level of complete clarity as it lacked the necessary energy to emerge. Not to speak in Herbert's terms, remained in the periphery of the field of consciousness, inhibited by the clear visual image. The following examples show this inhibition of the reaction together with the complete clarity of the visual image. Praise for the singer. Subject sees a certain teacher who praises her. Manners, good manners. Sees the picture of a Swiss country community of an old custom. Like will to like. Sees the written sum 2 times 2 equals 4. To stretch. Cat stretcher. What's a cat stretcher? Sees a stretched rubber band. Katzenstrecker is a popular nickname for a man from Lucerne. What's a cat stretcher? Cats. That sounds horrible. Cat stretcher. Oh, ChatGPT says, I don't know what a cat stretcher is. Katzenstrecker is a popular nickname for a man from Luzerne. I wonder if that's still true. Tight, tight-fisted. Sees a tight, narrow lead pipe. Stone, buck. Stein, Bach. Sees a collection of minerals. Change, time. Wäschel, Zeit. Sees a promissory note. Wäschel. Fashion, woman of fashion. Sees an elegant youth. Dull eyes. Sees a dull, rainy landscape, constellated by the day of the experiment. Mirror, smooth. Sees the windows of a certain glazier's. Forward, march. Sees a copy of Forward, newspaper. Down, to cut. Sees a low stool in certain sitting room. In these reactions, the connections between reaction and inner image, as it were, completely broken. The reaction mostly comes quite mechanically from a lower level of the process of apperception. Well, what is that word, apperception? I think we looked that up last time. I'm just not very good at remembering these new words. Apperception is a term used in psychology and philosophy to describe the process by which new experiences are assimilated into pre-existing. So it's like the incorporation of new things. I guess I don't perceive things well. At least not new words. Okay. In these reactions, the connection between reaction and inner image is, as it were, completely broken. The reaction mostly comes quite mechanically from a lower level of the process of apperception, of how the word was incorporated into your understanding. While the mental image mostly represents quite a different apperception of the stimulus word, the mental image mostly represents quite a different apperception. So wait, down, to cut. Well, I don't know. I understand why you would say cut down. Forward, march. I mean, all of these are understandable to me. That if somebody says forward, you would say march. But I guess the point is that they're not really connected, although I could easily connect them in my mind. Mirror smooth, that's a weird connection to make, I guess. I mean, but a mirror is smooth. Dull eyes. Yeah, I guess it's kind of an abstract connection. Like maybe if somebody said dull, you would want to say sharp. But if somebody says dull eyes, they must be thinking of someone. Maybe that's the point of this. That it's not a quick response where you would expect something like dull sharp. Instead, you get dull eyes and you think, why eyes? What are you thinking about? Where is that coming from? But the connection makes sense. In these reactions, the connection between reaction and inner image is, as it were, completely broken. The reaction mostly comes quite mechanically from a lower level of the process of apperception. So it comes from how you incorporate that word, or how the associations you made with that word inside. While the mental image mostly represents a quite different apperception from that of the stimulus word. Conversely, the visual image may be stimulated from a lower level of apperception, as the following examples show. Number quantity, Zahl or Menge. Sees a newly extracted tooth, Zahn. To will, you must, wollen, du musst. Sees a woolly, woolliges sheep. The character of association is objective. The external associations predominate, particularly the linguistic motor forms. Both attempts at distraction were very successful, particularly internal distraction. which resulted in 29% of the sound reactions. A few reactions under internal distraction are of interest. Wait, let me go back over these words. Number, quantity. Okay, the first one I don't understand. Sal, manga, I don't know. But maybe the second one, to will, you must, wollen, musst, Caesar woolly. Okay, I'm a little bit confused by this, but let's keep going. Lid, nid, senseless rhyme. The subject sees a beer mug with a lid. Hull, throat. Halle, hals. So is the word Hall? Well, no, I have to do some German translation here. English to German. Hall. Saal or Halle. Okay, so Halle is the German word for hall. What about throat? Is that the other word? Keller. Keller. Hals. Okay, der Hals. So somebody says hall, and then the person responds Hals, which is the German word for throat, but it sounds the same. It's like a rhyme. Okay. Sees a waiting room in a certain station. Fall, staff. Sees a waterfall. Stone, bone. Sees a picture of a little town of Stein on the Rhine. The fact that the numbers of internal associations remained nevertheless above the normal level in internal distraction and in the first half of external distraction can be attributed to the fact that the artificial lowering of attention was not uniform and continuous but decreased from time to time, whereupon normal reactions were given. The reactions obtained from the same subject in a state of great physical and mental fatigue give a more uniform picture of associative leveling down. According to these findings, the state of fatigue has no other significance for us for this experiment than a uniform lowering of attention. So the more tired you are, the less attention you are giving to the project. Its repercussion on the association is in no way different from the results of the distraction experiments, nor is a difference discernible in the finer points of the individual's associations, which cannot be counted or measured except in a very few reactions, the content of which is caused by the particular constellation of fatigue. As appears from our further observations on this subject and also from I can never say this guy's name. Aschaffenberg. I'm going to say Aschaffenberg's investigations. No specific change, other than the blunting of the emotional response during the state of fatigue, can be demonstrated. So it doesn't matter how tired you are, that just means you focus less, but it doesn't really change the results too much. The blunting of the reaction, if I understand this correctly, who knows? The blunting of the reaction and fatigue can easily be accounted for by a decrease of attention. We also have every reason to assume that the blunting of the reaction in alcoholic intoxication and manic excitation observed by Kreplin's school is nothing but a symptom of disturbed attention. So being manic or drunk doesn't, it just refocuses your attention, but doesn't really change the kind of responses that you would give, apparently. The connection with motor excitation suggested by Aschaffenberg is, in our view, merely an indirect one. The motor excitation lowers the intensity of attention and therefore brings about a blunting of associations. The disturbance of attention by motor excitation is a matter of experience, and in the named conditions has long been known as distractibility. The disturbance of attention by motor excitation, by being in an physically excited state, or by moving around or something like that, is a matter of experience, and in the named conditions has long been known as distractibility. Since attention as an affective condition is also linked to a certain somatic, that is, muscular processes, the decrease of its stability can be attributed to motor excitation. I'm going back. The disturbance of attention by motor excitation is a matter of experience, and in the named conditions has long been known as distractibility. Since attention as an affective condition is also linked to certain somatic, that is, muscular processes, the decrease of its stability can be attributed to motor excitation. Thus, Schaffenberg is not correct when he considers motor excitation as the direct cause of the blunting of the reaction. Motor excitation is absent in a whole series of abnormally low reactions, but common in all of these conditions is a disturbance of attention, which is probably always the immediate cause of all association types similar to flight of ideas. The origin of disturbed attention is, of course, different in, i.e., specific to each single process. It can be equally well based on motor excitation or on loss or decrease of kinesthetic feelings, on raising of the muscular stimulus threshold, on mental excitement, or on psychological split, as in our experiments. So now we have subject 3. About 21 years of age, intelligent, well-read, and then this is a plotting of the responses. Okay, the great variability of intensity of attention makes all association experiments with alcohol and fatigue susceptible to an error extremely difficult to estimate, so that in the state of our present experience, it is practically impossible to say anything positive about the extent of disturbances of association through alcohol, etc. Judging from the percentage ratios of these fatigue experiments, the subject must have been in an absolutely psychotic state, according to Schaffenberg's theory. A result with 5% internal associations and 27% sound reactions corresponds to a state of heavy intoxication, or serious mania, or a state of quite abnormal fatigue. So that's kind of interesting, because I think in part 1 he was saying, we can't really read too much into the words that people pick, besides classifying them in ways like, is it an internal association or an external association? Is it part of a grouping? Just like the plots, just as how they have it plotted here. They don't really pay any attention to the words that you say. They pay closer attention to what is the classification of the word. How does the word relate to the stimulus word? Which is what I thought he was saying, which I thought was weird, because when you watch movies about which include word association, they always kind of make it sound like, the word has a special meaning, whatever it is. Maybe it does, but here in this, all they're doing is they're classifying the words. Are they related internally or externally? Are they related by group, or are they related by reaction, syllable, rhyme? And now this chart is beginning to make more sense to me, because they're saying if you give a certain percentage of if you make a certain percentage of external associations or internal associations, this says something about where your concentration is, or what maybe could be wrong with you, or where your problems are. And they've even gotten it down to percentages. So according to Schaffenberg's theory, a result of 5% internal associations and 27% sound reactions corresponds to someone who is very intoxicated or experiencing mania, or a state of quite abnormal fatigue. The intensity of this blunting, however, can easily be explained by the fact that great but not abnormal fatigue was accompanied by marked drowsiness. The decrease of attention with raising of external stimulus thresholds. Peculiar to this condition is an analogy with distraction experiments to be considered as one of the main causes of blunting. And then we have this footnote here. I think I missed some of the footnotes. I think the last footnote I read was 6, and now we're at 12. I have to pay attention to that. Okay, see below, experiment in drowsiness with subject 15, educated men. Okay, the intensity of drowsiness is an unmeasurable quantity. How much drowsiness was present in the states of fatigue imagined by Schaffenberg? Drowsiness is not merely a somatic, physiological, but also to be certain extent a psychological phenomenon, which may perhaps be described by the name auto-hypnosis. I wonder if that's like when you're driving and you're really tired and you get highway hypnosis. Maybe that's similar. I think that's what they're talking about here. It is primarily a psychological event that takes place in the area of consciousness. It is mainly stimulated by somatic sensations. You know, let me just look up that word, somatic. Doesn't that just mean it has to do with the body? Let's see. Yeah, relates to the body, especially as distinct from the mind. It is primarily a psychological event that takes place in the area of consciousness. It is mainly stimulated by somatic sensations, so physical sensations, but can also be produced by pure suggestion. Exactly the same applies to the effect of alcohol. The effects of alcohol may be, to a large extent, particularly in the beginning of narcosis, purely suggestive. What is narcosis? Narcosis typically refers to a state of stupor, lethargy, or unconsciousness that can be induced by various substances, particularly drugs or anesthesia. The term is often used in context of medical and physiological effects. This probably accounts for the fact that the effects of alcohol on different dispositions may be quite different. Can one exclude or calculate the suggestive effects of alcohol in the alcohol experiment? In our view, this is not possible. Therefore, great caution is advisable in psychological alcohol experiments. Accordingly, disturbance of attention and fatigue in alcohol experiments need not always have its roots in motor excitation, but could equally well be derived from suggestion. Let us return to our experiment. The great prevalence of external association can be attributed to momentary decrease of attention. The great prevalence of external associations can be attributed to a momentary decrease of attention. So this person made a lot of external associations, and maybe the reason was They weren't paying attention. I guess that's what he's saying, right? The cause of the blunt reaction can, however, lie deeper. It is not unthinkable that there are individuals who, because of a congenital or acquired anomaly, have a more superficial mode of association than others. This anomaly may possibly lie in the sphere of attention, in that fatigue appears much more quickly than in other people. The figures for the sister and mother of subject 3 are interesting in this respect as observations of family psychology. We give the tables here. Subject 4, about 20 years of age, is the sister of subject 3. The associations have in general an objective nature. The external ones predominate considerably, especially the linguistic motor forms. Some sound reactions are also numerous, so that the character of the normal state looks like the result of a distraction experiment. In the experiment of internal distraction, there is an unexpected increase of internal associations, as well as clear increase of sound reactions. The superficiality displayed in the experiment under the normal conditions is in our experience abnormal. Thus, we must assume a disturbance of attention in this state. The subject is a definite motor type. From other experiments performed with the subject, it becomes apparent that motor perception predominates by far over other senses. And we have a footnote here. By that, we do not mean that some sort of motor excitation is responsible for the blunt reaction type. In personalities of a motor type, the motor factors perhaps play an independent role in the word-image combination that they facilitate talking. Externally, too, the motor disposition is shown by great vivacity of movement and a strongly developed ability for motor expression. It must here be stressed that this is active motility, but by far exceeds the limits of conscious innervation and is expressed in motor automatisms. I'm just going to define that word, automatism. Automatism refers to the performance of actions without conscious thought or intention. In various contexts, the term is used to describe behaviors or movements that occur automatically, often without the individual being fully aware of them. Automatism can manifest in different forms, and the term is applied in several fields. Okay, I think we don't have to read the full definition. I think that's good enough. All right. Externally, too, the motor disposition is shown by great vivacity of movement and a strongly developed ability for motor expression. It must here be stressed that this is an active motility. This active motility by far exceeds the limits of conscious innervation. You know, I had that word innervation in one of my English classes, and now I forget. Does innervate mean make energy, causes energy, or makes you lose energy? Wait, let me see. Innervate. I'm ashamed I don't remember that because I spent a lot of time talking about that with someone very recently. The term innervate refers to the process of supplying nerves or providing nerve impulses to a particular organ or part of the body. Innervation is the distribution or supply of nerves to a specific area. Innervate can also be used metaphorically or more general context to describe the stimulation or activation of any system or organ, not necessarily limited to the nervous system. So wait, does that mean you have a lot of energy or not? Let me check Google here. Oh, that's funny because now I don't see the definition that I found earlier. I think it means to have a lot of energy, to feel innervated. What is a synonym for energized? Yeah. Okay, so it means having a lot of energy. Among the reactions of the normal state, there are two linguistic automatisms. A linguistic automatism. Among the reactions of the normal state, there are two linguistic. So if an automatism is an unconscious or a movement of the body that you're not aware of, then is a linguistic automatism saying something and you're not aware of it? Like an accident? Let's see. There are very probably related to an unconscious complex. This complex is closely connected with the affect concerning a past engagement. Thus, we have two probable reasons for the strikingly blunt reaction type: the strong and abnormally independent motor tendency, and a partially suppressed affect. The latter probably has the most significance for the blunting. Okay, and then we have a chart here giving the reactions of subject 4, right? Is that subject 4? Yeah, and subject 4 and subject 5. What were they, mother and daughter or sisters? Okay, well we won't read through those numbers. We'll just read through the explanation. Uh-oh, what's going on here? Okay. It would be too much of a digression to examine the individual psychology of this case more closely. This will be done elsewhere. The increase of internal associations during distraction experiments is a phenomenon that we find again in subjects of different character, who under normal conditions also show an abnormally blunt type. We know no other explanation for the improvement of... oh, wait. Let's check out this footnote for 14. Oh, okay. This is subject 16, educated men. We know no other explanation for the improvement of reaction type in this case than that the attention, which under normal conditions is tied to the emotional complex, is released by the conditions of the experiment, new to the subject, and can therefore be used. I'm just rereading this again. I should do it out loud since I have people watching this. We know no other explanation for the improvement of the reaction type. So we don't know how to explain this difference in the reaction. I don't know why they call it an improvement. Then the attention. So the only way that they can explain this difference in reaction is because of the focus of the person, how well the person is focusing, which under normal conditions is tied to the emotional complex. So how much attention you pay is normally tied to how you're feeling or what you're feeling, is released by the conditions of the experiment, new to the subject. So participating in the experiment somehow changes your reaction. Is that what he's saying? I think that's what he's saying. Okay, again, if you're listening along, there are people watching this, there are people listening along, and you have a different interpretation. I would love to hear it. This is just mine, and I'm not sure if I'm right about that. Okay, nevertheless, great fluctuation of attention occurred. This is indicated by a large number of sound reactions, together with relatively numerous internal reactions. A special peculiarity of this subject is the occasional occurrence of marked synesthesias, audition coloré. So what is synesthesia? Let's define that. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Synesthesia. Let me try that again. Synesthesia. Oh. Synesthesia is a neurological phenomenon in which stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in a second pathway. This means that the stimulation of one sense can trigger a simultaneous and automatic experience in another sense. For example, a person with synesthesia might perceive colors when they hear music, associate specific tastes with certain words, or see numbers in specific colors. There are various types of synesthesia, and it can involve different combinations of sensory perceptions. Okay. A special peculiarity of this subject is the occasional occurrence of marked synesthesia. Audition colorée. So maybe they hear a sound and they see a color, which influences the reaction. Examples under normal conditions. U is yellow for the subject. I'm not. U is yellow for the subject. Misery, Elend. Something red. E is red, indolent. Trüger, blue. A is blue. I don't understand. Examples from the distraction experiment. Orgy, orgy. Subject sees a yellow mass. Pious, blessed. Sees something yellow. I don't understand what this is about. Okay, strangely enough, the subject 3, who has the same reaction type as 4, is also a definite motor type and also has a very vivid synesthesias, which, as it happens, did not appear in the reactions. The following phenomena from the distraction experiment are worth mentioning. Stork, stork's leg. Subject sees a church tower. Hinder, Hamlet, Hamlet. Sees a break. Fall, bone. Fall, falls bien, falls spine. Paper knife. Sees a high wall from which one could fall. Red, wine. Sees a red sphere. Barrel. Faster, Vater, father. Sees a certain cellar. I really don't understand what they're trying to say there. Okay, from the subject's account, the visual image fills consciousness completely and exclusively, the verbal reaction being given almost involuntarily and touching consciousness only quite superficially. The visual image fills the consciousness completely and exclusively. So, let's go back. Sees a wall from which one could fall. Fall, bone. So I don't understand these. Paper knife. But okay, what about red? Sees a red sphere. Red. Wine. I don't know. No, I'm not going to waste time trying to figure that out more. Let's just keep going. Maybe it will become clear if we read more. Okay. Subject 5 is the mother of subject 3 and 4. Quantitatively, the reaction type shows much similarity with that of subject 3 and 4. The objective character of the reactions is qualitatively also very similar. Particularly prominent in these 3 people are the linguistic motor forms. Characteristic of this family type are sound reactions under normal conditions, which distinguishes this type from others. For comparison, we give the main figures for these subjects under normal conditions. So the mother had 29% internal associations, the elder daughter 27, the younger daughter 13. The mother had 62% external associations, elder daughter 67, and younger daughter 71. And the mother had 5% sound reactions, elder daughter 3.5, younger daughter 11.5. We draw attention to the increasing degree of blunting in the younger daughter. If the figures were all from, I don't ever recall him defining blunting. Let's see, word association, blunting, definition. Let's see if ChatGPT can give us a definition for this. The term blunting might be associated with a variety of meanings, depending on the individual's experience, context, and perspective. Here are a few possible associations. Emotional blunting. This could refer to a diminished ability to express or feel emotions. Cognitive blunting. This might be associated with a decrease in cognitive sharpness or mental acuity. Blunting as a reaction. In certain situations, blunting might be associated with a defensive or coping mechanism where a person intentionally dulls or minimizes their emotional responses to protect themselves from overwhelming feelings. Okay. Why was I looking that up? Where were they talking about blunting? We draw our attention to increasing number of blunting in the younger daughter. So he says the younger daughter is blunting. Does that mean because she makes more external associations instead of internal? I don't know. Okay, well, let's keep going. Maybe we'll figure it out as we go. Perhaps this relationship is accidental, but perhaps it has deeper psychological reasons. We refer to a similar observation reported below. Ronchberg found 11.8% more internal associations in old than young subjects. So Ronchberg found 11.8% more internal associations in old than in younger subjects. So if you compare the elder daughter and the younger daughter, there is a 14% difference. In older rather than young. And then if you compare with the mother, she has the highest and she's also the oldest. So she makes more internal associations. And the younger daughter made very high external associations, much higher than the mother and the sister. I guess that's what he must mean by blunting here. Okay. Such external associations are usually found in the normal state predominate. Such external associations as are usually found in the normal state predominate. The second 100 shows a slight increase of external associations and a clear increase of sound reactions. The quality of association deviates considerably from the types so far reported. Reactions of strongly subjective character occurring with the subject. They are in part highly charged value judgments. Pupil, boring. Father, good. Book, interesting. School, beautiful. Frog, nice. Piano, horrible. An increase in external associations and a clear increase of sound reactions. The quality of association deviates considerably from the types so far reported. Reactions of strongly subjective character occurring with this subject. They are highly charged value judgments. Okay, so these are all very subjective reactions. On the other hand, it predicates that designate properties of things that are to a greater or lesser extent evident to the senses. In the second hundred, an increase of groupings from 9 to 14 and a decrease of predicative relations from 32 to 14 can be noticed. Accordingly, the quality of reactions is altered insofar as they assume a noticeably more objective character, with a tendency to irrelevant cliches. The decrease of predicative relations is due to the shifting of subjective value judgments into the background. Thus, the more subtle quality of the reactions also shows a markedly faded interest. The relaxation of attention is shown very clearly in the decrease of egocentric reactions from 10 to 4. From this result, the distraction experiments must be considered a failure. Objectively, this is also shown by the subjects being unable simultaneously to follow the beat of the metronome and to react. Either the motion of writing ceased at the moment of the reaction, or the reaction time lengthened to the next pause in the beat, when the reaction was given with renewed attention. The only disturbing influence was the perseveration phenomenon, which significantly only occurred with external distraction. Okay, another chart. This is, who is this? Or is this everybody together? What is this? Yeah, subject 6, 35 years of age, intelligent, well-read, poetic, talent. The almost undiminished personal interest at the time of external distraction is well illustrated by the relatively large number of egocentric reactions. We will refrain from judging how far the relatively strong verbal connection by consonants under normal conditions is caused by the constellations of active poetic application. Many reactions of this subject betray a strong visual predisposition. From the subject's own account, every stimulus concept presents itself as a quite definite picture. The entirely individual character of the reactions distinguishes this subject from others and differentiates her from the subjects so far discussed. It is interesting to learn whether this type is accidental or whether it is of familiar origin. Happily, we are in the position of being able to some extent to answer this question. Subject 7. The number of internal associations considerably predominates over the external ones. The number of predicative relations is extremely great. Most of these consist of subject value judgments, some of which are highly charged, e.g., to cook, laborious; water, wonderful; star, magnificent; to ride, dangerous; prison, horrible. About 40% of the reactions betray an egocentric direct wish or a defense. Subject 8. The internal associations are more numerous than the external. This subject also showed a very subjective reaction type, which appears particularly in large number of predicative relations, and especially in the numerous subjective value judgments. The number of egocentric reactions, too, is rather high. For these figures and from the individual quality of the reactions, a clear familiar relation emerges. Thus we can conclude with some probability that the subject reaction type of subject 6 is based on coincidence, not on coincidence, but on familiar disposition. It will be of interest to consider the quantitative aspects within this family, particularly whether in the case of the youngest member we can prove an analogous proportion in respect to the blunting phenomenon found in the family of subject 3, 4, and 5. For this purpose, we again collate the main figures of our subjects in a normal state. Subject 7. The mother of subject 6 and over 50 years of age, educated. And this is just the chart, the compilation of reactions. And then we have the mother has internal associations of 75%, elder daughter 56%, younger daughter 35%. External associations, the mother is 19%, elder daughter 39%, younger daughter 58%. Sound reactions, mother 0, elder daughter 1%, younger daughter 5.5%. Egocentric reactions, 40% mother, 15% elder daughter, 7% younger daughter. These figures show a complete analogy to what we find in subjects 3, 4, and 5. This too looks like a distraction experiment, which goes as far as the reversal of the relation of internal to external associations. There is a corresponding increase of sound associations, as well as a decrease of egocentric reactions, which, as was shown in subject 6, express the degree of personal interest. This strange analogy between the two family types does appear to be more than mere coincidence. Unfortunately, our material is not sufficient to elucidate these observations. A final statement and interpretation of this apparent fact must for the moment await an experiment at present being carried out based on specially collected material. Subject 8, the elder sister of subject 6 and 39 years of age, educated. So this is a plotting of her reactions. The reaction type of the last three subjects is characteristic and widespread. What distinguish it from other less definite types are the numerous predicates, among which is a considerable number of subjective value judgments. We call this type the predicate type. The following three subjects are further examples of it. Subject 9, the predominance of predicative relationships is clear in all phases of the experiment. Internal distraction could not be carried out as the subject was not capable of dividing her attention. Why do they say that? What do you mean you're not capable of dividing your attention? Is that possible? The experiment of external distraction failed completely, as the subject, exactly like subject 6, could not carry out two actions at the same time, and therefore behaved exactly like subject 6. Only in the larger numbers of verbal connection by number of syllables, alliteration, and consonants may a certain shift of reaction towards the mechanical side be noticed. 3 of the 4 failures under normal conditions are associated with emotionally charged stimulus words: unjust, rich, stupid. The average predominance of internal association over external is noteworthy in an educated subject. Let me read that again. The average predominance of internal association over external is noteworthy in an educated subject. The reaction type is a mixed one and does not by any means show the strongly subjective character of subjects 6, 7, and 8. Subject 10. The predicative relationships are on the average many times as numerous as the number of groupings. With reference to the failure in distraction, the same must be stated for subjects 6 and 9. The reaction type is, particularly in the first 100 under normal conditions, a somewhat subjective one, which incidentally is also expressed by the 9% of egocentric reactions. Perseverations occur solely with distraction. as in subject 9. There's an increase in the number of syllables and consonances, which perhaps may be interpreted as slight disassociation. The large number of failures in all phases of the experiment is striking. Of the 14 failures under normal conditions, 10 coincide with emotionally charged stimulus words: must, unjust, violence, to threaten, to suffer. And in other 2 failures, the subjective emotional charge of the stimulus word is only probable. It must here be said that the subject is slightly hysterical insofar as she has somnambulant dreams. Just want to define that word, somnambulant. Ooh, let me try that again. Well, ChatGPT is down. It's not working for me. Let me try Google. Somnambulant, a characteristic of a sleepwalker, sluggish. Okay. It must be said that the subject is slightly hysterical insofar as she has somnambulant dreams. So she sleepwalks. We shall present the proof of this hypothesis in a publication about association anomalies and hysteria, which will appear later. Okay, we have, I guess that's subject 9, yeah. 20 years of age, well-read, fairly intelligent. These are the plotting of the associations. And then they also show subject 10, about 20 years of age, intelligent, very well-read. Subject 11. I'm not going to read, that would be very boring to read all of these numbers, so we're not going to go through that. This is hard enough as it is. Subject 11 is an outstanding predicate type of subjective character with numerous value judgments. A marked slackening in the second hundred is striking. This may be attributed to obvious and objectively established boredom. Thus, the second hundred does not correspond to normal conditions, but rather to a distraction experiment. Nevertheless, if we compare the reaction type of this subject with that of the daughter, subject 10, we find the same phenomenon as before. That is, that the daughter's reaction type is a blunter one than that of the mother. So the mother has 51% internal associations and 43% external, and the daughter has 36 internal and 53 external. We take this opportunity to repeat that in spite of this agreement, the phenomenon may be pure coincidence and therefore urgently requires retesting. We also give the figures for 3 further subjects. Subject 12, a North German lady. The large number of current phrases is particularly striking. Internal distraction failed. External distraction shows a definite disturbance of attention. The reaction type is objective. Subject 13, very diffident. What is that word? I think I've looked that up. I just have a very horrible memory. So let me... Diffident. What does that mean? I've already looked it up, but I can't remember. Well, if I do it several times, then eventually I will remember it. Diffident means modest or shy because of lack of self-confidence. Okay, who was diffident? Where did that go? Subject 13, very diffident, so very shy because doesn't have self-confidence. Hence the large number of repetitions of stimulus word. Only distraction by metronome beat of 100 was to any degree successful. The writing movements were, in accordance with what has been said before, very awkward. Subject 14. We give figures for this subject only for the sake of completeness. The reaction type is an objective one. Internal distraction was only partially successful. Its effect is uncertain, as because of the omission of the second hundred of normal reactions, we have no information on the degree of variation in normal people. The second hundred could not be obtained for external reasons. Summary of the group of educated women. Unfortunately, the material collected in this group is quantitatively somewhat uneven. On the other hand, the linguistic background is very similar. Only 1 out of the 14 subjects coming from North Germany, and all others being Swiss, whose colloquial language is the Swiss dialect. Their level of education is, in general, very high. 2 of the subjects having university education. 6 subjects know one or 2 foreign languages. 10 subjects are relatively well read. Distraction experiments were carried out with 10 subjects. Of these, in 5 cases, external and internal distraction. In 2 cases, only internal, and in 3 cases, only external was carried out. External distraction was definitely successful in 4 cases. Internal in 3. 1 case of internal and 1 of external distraction were partially successful. Okay, and then we've got subject 12, about 40 years of age, very intelligent, well read. Subject 13, about 22 years of age, intelligent, all around culture. And subject 14, about 22 years of age, fairly intelligent and cultured. Distraction failed in 4 cases, of which 3 are definite predicate types. All predicate types who took part in the distraction experiments at all showed a much smaller distraction phenomenon than the other subjects. Of the 6 subjects over 30 years of age, 3 showed an average predominance of internal association over external. Of the 8 subjects under 30 years of age, only 1 subject showed a predominance of internal association over external. 2. Educated men. 9 subjects with 3,793 associations. Oh, I'm going to take a minute break. It's time for me to refresh my tea. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Well, this is some pretty dry reading, but I have a feeling later on in later volumes we'll get to the really cool stuff. But we've got to take the good with the bad if we want to do the whole thing, right? So let's keep reading this. It's not particularly that interesting, but we must do it if we want to read it all. Okay, here we go. So, subject 15. Reactions were obtained in this subject in 4 different states of disturbed attention. In the states of internal and external distraction, fatigue, and morning drowsiness on waking. The reaction type is a very blunt one, and the ratio between internal and external associations shows 15 to 78 and 29 to 65. The reactions show a very objective, almost entirely verbal character. The distraction experiments do not have much influence on the ratio between internal and external associations. On the other hand, the progression of sound reactions illustrates the increasing disturbance of attention, which reaches its maximum in the second external distraction experiment. Fatigue, which admittedly in this case was not yet very great, produced no change in type. The state of drowsiness caused a disturbance of attention which far surpassed the effect of the second external distraction. The subject experiences intense morning drowsiness after mental work at night, and it is difficult to wake him up completely. These reactions were obtained while the subject lay in bed and was only partially awake. The subject had been warned beforehand. The 2 experiments were carried out on 2 different days, with an interval of about a week. As the figure shows, the type is an excessively blunt one. Sound reactions are extraordinarily numerous, particularly the rhymes. The figures for verbal connection are very high. This reaction type shows the reaction to the most primitive linguistic mechanisms in, as it were, complete isolation. Fatigue is entirely excluded in these experiments. There is merely a decrease of active attention, normal towards the end of sleep. As far as we know, attention is completely extinguished in sleep. If one succeeded in obtaining a reaction from a sleeping but not somnambulant subject, sound reactions would be the only result. In our view, absolute, undeviating attention directed inwards would have the same result. We are in the happy position of being able to report on a case that proves this to be so. I just want to read that last part again. In our view, absolute undeviating attention directed inwards would have the same result. So they're saying that if you're sleeping, you have 0 attention. And in our view, absolute undeviating attention directed inwards would have the same result as what? Okay, well, let's see. Maybe, I think he's about to give an example, and maybe that will clarify this. The subject N was deeply disturbed by violent affects. Outwardly, the main symptom was an almost complete lack of ability to concentrate. She kept the cause of her affects secret. In the experiment to which she submitted, out of scientific interest, she produced, apart from a few inexplicable senseless reactions, mainly sound and rhyme reactions. In the experiment to which she submitted out of scientific interest, she produced, apart from a few inexplicable senseless reactions, mainly sound and rhyme reactions. We should like to compare this case with a distraction experiment spread out over several days. Attention is completely bound up with the inner emotionally charged complex. Oh, wait, there's a footnote here. By emotionally charged complex, we mean that the sum of ideas referring to a particular feeling-toned event. We shall always use the term complex in this sense in what follows. By emotionally charged complex, we mean that the sum of ideas referring to a particularly feeling-toned event. We shall always use this term as complex in the sense of what follows. In the present volume, emotionally charged is the translation adopted from the German Affekt betont, or betonta, Affekt betonta, and as a rule, feeling toned for Gefühlsbetonte, psychology of dementia precox. Okay. All right, let's go back here. We cannot, of course, from which she cannot detach herself for comparatively unimportant incidents. Her attention is thus abnormally low for anything that does not concern the complex. We cannot, of course, judge how far this withdrawal is conscious. As the subject related, at the beginning of the experiment, certain strongly charged ideas belonging to the complex were in her mind, which she constantly tried to suppress, because she feared they might betray themselves in the reaction. From the second third of the experiment onwards, only the feeling tone of the complex persisted in consciousness, without these accompanying vivid ideas. The next thing to occur to the subject were only sounds. The stimulus words only made an impact by the sound and never by the sense. These observations prove most clearly the dependence of sound reactions, particularly those of the blunt reaction type, on disturbance of attention. Now, how can we explain the normally blunt reaction type? The subject was psychologically trained and took the greatest interest in the experiment. The blunt reaction type would seem to be connected with the fact that many educated subjects regard the experiment as simply verbal. They see the experiment against a verbal background, and thus they try to respond to the stimulus word by the first word to occur, without considering the meaning of the stimulus word. They do so because it seems obvious to them that an isolated stimulus word cannot have any special significance. This is how we explain the great predominance of verbal and sound associations. All those subjects who let themselves be influenced by the meaning rather than by the word, rather than by the mere word, tend to form internal associations. So people who let themselves be influenced by the meaning rather than just by hearing the word, rather than just by reacting to the word, tend to form internal associations. The meaning that different people give to the stimulus word will vary. In our experience, there are two main types of people. One, the subject tries to do justice to the meaning as objectively as possible. Therefore, in his reaction, he produces some general or special association of objective significance. The reaction is usually a coordinating relationship. The subject endeavors to designate in a telling way the object named by the stimulus word, which he vividly pictures. To state something about the stimulus word, the subject uses the predicate. The reaction is therefore, in most cases, a predicative relationship. On these grounds, the blunt reaction type of certain educated subjects should not be considered as the result of some disturbance of attention, but as an attitude phenomenon. Bleuler, by the term attitude phenomenon we understand with Bleuler the emergence of an apparently abnormal reaction type through intentional preference for a certain mode of reaction. The mode is not, however, as must be stressed, chosen arbitrarily, but motivated by the particular psychology of the subject. So people react to words based on what they think they are, or who they think they are, or what they think they want the outcome to be, I think is what he's saying here. The more intense the attitude to the sound effect of the stimulus word, the blunter the reaction type must become, for by specially directed attention, the subject will stress and put in the foreground all of the more primitive associations that are repressed in the normal active speech. Thus, a very paradoxical picture can be created by the numerical presentation of the results of the experiment. We can understand it only on the grounds that we have given. The following case will illustrate this. Good, I'm glad he's giving an illustration. Subject 16. Here we find again a strikingly blunt reaction type in the experiment under normal conditions, which is illustrated particularly by a large number of sound reactions. The blunting is considerably increased in the experiment with external distraction. On the other hand, in the experiment with external distraction, a striking improvement of reaction appears. The number of internal associations far exceeding that for the experiment under normal conditions. The improvement is quite clearly demonstrated by the increase and eventual disappearance of the sound reactions. This particular result is unique in our experiments and needs discussion. We've already mentioned the present subject in discussing subject 4 of the group of educated women who presented a similar picture. We then assumed that suppressed affect was the cause of the blunt reaction type. In this connection, the very satisfying findings presented above in the discussion of subject 15 of the group of educated men should also be mentioned. The recent very strong affect that took complete possession of this subject was the direct cause of the preponderance of sound reactions. The affect in this case was repressed inasmuch as it did not manifest itself directly in the reaction, but only indirectly through a splitting of attention. One must assume a similar psychological situation also for subject 4 of the group of educated women, and so explain the blunt type. The fact that subject 4 of the group of educated women and subject 16 in the group of educated men are of the same type is perhaps fortuitous. Affect is probably completely out of the question in subject 16. We must therefore look for another cause for the blunt type. We find it in the attitude phenomenon. Subject 16 is thoroughly trained in psychology and at the same time has extraordinary powers of concentration. The subject had from the first directed his attention toward the sound of the stimulus word and consequently reproduced the first association to occur. These can only be primitive verbal connections and sounds. If our presuppositions on associations closest to the perception of the stimulus word are at all correct. In this way, the abnormally blunt type in the experiment under normal conditions can be explained without difficulty. And then we have the chart of subject 16, 47 years of age, intelligent, very well educated. The blunting increases in the internal distraction experiments. The subject carried out this experiment in a model way. Concentration on the D, distraction, phenomenon was excellent, as was the reporting of it. We therefore have no reason in this case not to assume the distraction of attention. Thus, the blunt type of reaction in this experiment is to be attributed to decrease of attention. It springs from a root different from one in the experiment under normal conditions. Consequently, it is not an attitude phenomenon. External distraction has a disturbing effect on the attention of most subjects and therefore causes blunting. In the present case, the effect appears to be the opposite. The normal state of this case is characterized by the attitude phenomenon. Attention is directed exclusively to the linguistic aspect. Now, this attitude is disturbed by external distraction, and the subject now has a different relation to the stimulus word, i.e., the exclusive observation of the sound is disturbed, and thus the production of the nearest primitive association is prevented. If the associations that are always repressed under normal conditions sink back into repression, the next ones to follow must be the associations conditioned by the meaning of the stimulus word, i.e., the number of sound reactions must fall and the number of internal associations must rise. That is the case here. The figures for fatigue show a remarkable agreement with those for internal distraction. Judging from external demeanor, one could diagnose quite severe fatigue. This was actually not the case. The fatigue was by no means abnormally severe, but merely a relatively slight evening fatigue, which, according to the subject's account, did not noticeably influence the reaction. Here again we have an attitude phenomenon and meta-disturbance of attention. That the attitude was apparently more intense in this state can perhaps be deduced from the fact that the subject, who is a motor type, is, when slightly fatigued, liable to motor excitation. Speech motility, of course, also plays part in the general motor excitation, the speech mechanism very easily responding to the appropriate stimulus. This circumstance may have coincided in the case with a special attitude resulting in a greater number of purely mechanical connections. As can be expected of such a type, the personal and subjective elements in the quality of the reactions gradually recede with few exceptions. Subject 17, the reaction type, is fairly blunt. In internal associations, predicates are particularly prominent and have an almost exclusively objective nature, as the number of egocentric reactions shows. Relatively few subjective aspects appear, but as predicate types always present emotionally charged constellations, there is here too an emotionally charged complex, noticeable in the reactions. The experiment was carried out on a very hot day. Among the repetitions there is snow twice and to sweat twice. Apart from these, there are the following perseverations. And so we have plotting of the words in a chart. Stove, warm. Walk, hot. 3, I don't know what that's supposed to be for number 3. Water, to bathe. To dance, to sweat. Subject 18. The subject, a doctor, 36 years old, felt indisposed during the experiment under normal conditions. The experiment with external distraction could not be carried out because of illness. The 100 associations carried out in fatigue were obtained after an eventful night without sleep. Internal distraction and fatigue show a striking agreement, a most definite decrease of internal associations, increase in external, and particularly in sound associations and word completion, an increase in the same number of syllables group, while the figures for the same grammatical form remained on the whole uninfluenced. In the first 100 in the experiment under normal conditions, there is a preponderance of internal over external associations. In the second 100, the relationship is reversed, 30 to 59. The constant increase of word completion and sound reactions in the experiment with internal distraction is nicely demonstrated. If they are counted separately in each third of the 100 associations, we find first third, 2 word completions, 6 sound reactions. Second third, 5 word completions, 6 sound reactions. Third, 9 word completions, 9 sound reactions. The predicates are already on the decrease in the second hundred of the experiment under normal conditions, even more so with internal distraction. They disappear completely in fatigue. Rhymes do not become prominent till the fatigue experiment. We only find 2 under internal distraction and none in the experiment under normal conditions. Constellations and complexes. In Subject 18, we meet a relatively large number of associations that can be explained only by reference to individual experiences from the recent past or present, e.g., ring, garden. At the time of the experiment, the gold ring had been found in the garden of the establishment where the subject worked, and its owner had not been found. Here's a chart of Subject 18, 36 years of age. Or close Stapfer, a patient by the name of Stapfer, who was in the care of a particular colleague, worried him greatly because, for example, he ordered clothes and afterwards already found so much to criticize in them that he finally would not wear the garment. There then followed much unpleasantness with the tailor and other suppliers. Or pencil Koh-i-Noor. Our colleague had at the time of the experiment just learned about the useful properties of the brand of pencil. Or murderer Kaufman. Our colleague had at this time to give an opinion of a defendant by the name of Kaufman, who had committed murder when intoxicated. This type of association is caused by definite constellations, Zihen, referring to relatively new, subjective, possibly emotionally charged experiences. In some subjects, e.g. subjects 25 and 27, uneducated women, we find none at all or only very few such individuals react throughout entirely objectively and betray practically nothing personal in the associations. For example, they associate river with stream, schoolboy, schoolgirl, table, floor, lamp, oil, mountain, valley, kiss, laugh, plunder, catch, beat, bite, prison, punishment. Admittedly, other subjects also make objective associations from time to time. There are among them associations which, in spite of their objectivity, allow conclusions about the subject. Although they do not in the least betray his inner personality, it will not be difficult, for instance, to recognize the male nurse from the following compilation of associations. Subject 35, uneducated men. To fetch, to run. To stink, foul ear. To inform, report. Prison, asylum. Ill, melancholic. Errand, to run. Freedom, convalescence. Consciousness, to drink or sobriety. Nevertheless, the constellation plays only a very indirect role in these associations. Then there are subjects, that is to say, associations in which not the momentary constellations, but the individual experiences predominate. Lake, sea. Untersee, the subject had from time to time been to that lake. Father, grandfather, the subject still has a grandfather. Mountain, Glarmish. Oh, Glarnish. What is it? Glarmish? I guess it's Glamish. I can't tell if it's Glarnish or Glamish. Okay, it doesn't matter. The subject had been to that mountain once, so that must be the name of a mountain. Glarnish. Let's see. Glarn. I just want to see, is it Glarnish? Yes, with an R. Glanish. I don't know how to say that. Do they pronounce it on Google? Whoops. Oh, there's no pronunciation. Oh well. Hair. Hair lotion. The subject occasionally prepares hair lotion in the dispensary for the patients. Sweet. Suskind. Proper name of someone not at all important to the subject. Okay, potato. Tobacco fields. Fortuitous memory of a journey from Basel to Heidelberg. Coffee. Brazil. The subject had several times drunk Brazilian coffee. These are mainly subjective reminiscences going a step further. We encounter the constellations sensu strictiori. Sensu strictiori. Does that mean without restriction? Let's see. Sensu restrictiori. Let's see. Oh, you know, I should get in the habit of, instead of trying to spell this, just copy and paste it. This is copyable. So what am I doing? Sensu stricto. Strictly speaking. Okay. Strictly speaking. Where did that go? So these are mainly subjective reminiscences. Going a step further, we encounter the constellations sensu strictiori, strictly speaking, that we first mentioned when discussing subject 18 in the group of educated men. Individuals with many constellations usually also have many reminiscences. A separate group of constellations arises in some individuals. Through the influence of the immediate surroundings in which the experiment is carried out. The reaction words carpet, flowers, ink, pot, calendar, books, pen holder, landscape, telephone, wallpaper, curtain, mirror, sofa, etc. usually refer to objects in the consulting room, even if they are associated with a quite suitable stimulus word. The subject does not necessarily need to see the objects, but only to know that they are in the room. See Subject 25 on educated women. From pathology in normal, imbecilic, hysterical, and stupidity, quite pronounced cases of this type of association are known to us. If the stimulus word evokes a subjective, emotionally stressed image with the corresponding reaction, then we get a special type of constellation association, namely the egocentric, as in part 1, in subject 4, educated women. We find only a few, e.g. piano, horrible. The subject had to put up with the tinkling of her... Wait, what? The subject had to put up with the tinkling of her not exactly musical neighbor. Okay, the tinkling. Tinkling means, I guess, attempting to play music. Or to be lazy, glorious. The egocentricity of this reaction is readily understandable for a busy person who is looking forward to an approaching holiday. In some cases, an egocentric reaction can be directly replaced by a missing reaction, a failure. See definition in part 1. Oh, what happens if I click on part? I would love to redefine failure, but I'm afraid if I click on part 1, we'll never find. Okay, this is page 507. I'm going to do it. Oh no, it just brings you back to part 1. It doesn't bring you to the definition. Now I forgot which number that was, 5 something. Oh no. Now I did it. I can't remember. Was it 527? Where is it? Oh no, no, we're on 707. All right. I think it was like 527. Note to self, never do that again. What person is this? This is, oh, uneducated women. We haven't gotten that far yet. All right. I think I'm just going to stop here because I've been reading for 2.5 hours now anyway. So, and I've lost my place. So I have to go back and figure out where I stopped. All right. Well, thank you, those of you who stayed and watched the entire time. And we will continue this next time. We'll get through. It's starting to get a little bit more interesting. Less about numbers and more about interesting things. So next time we will continue. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.